I'm really excited today to be talking to Zeeshan Siddique. He's currently a UK panels director at GfK. Zeeshan, well, to me, he's been a friend, a mentor, and a colleague for the past few years. But I don't actually want to introduce him. I'll hand over to you, Zeeshan, to introduce yourself because I won't do it justice.
Thank you, Graham. And before we get started, just going to say it's been easier to organise my wedding than get together with you on a podcast. I don't know how many times we've tried, but we're finally here on a Thursday, Europa League night, which is good for both of us. But anyway, I won't go into that.
Oh, I can't believe you dropped that. And that's staying in the recording as well. That will stay in the recording.
That's fine. That's fine. As you kindly introduced me as a GfK stalwart, I would say, a one club man, the Stevie G of market research, I would say. So I started my career over 20 years ago with what was then NOP Research, turned into NOP World, and eventually to GfK in around 2005. Currently, GfK has gone through quite a transformation and sort of moved from being a market research company into the technology sort of space. And so we're more of a tech company now, sort of specializing in data analytics and advanced AI, although we have retained a lot of research facilities, and I work in the media measurement, which is a major arm of the research element. So yeah, I've had a varied career, all with one company, which I think says a lot about the company itself, that I've managed to stay here for such a length of time. And so at the moment it's panels director. So we have a large media panel that runs daily, 365 days a year, about 20,000 people strong. And we do about 300,000 surveys in the year. So it's pretty hands-on. It's a bit different from what I'm used to of managing big teams, and I'll go through the history I've had. But yeah, it's more a smaller team working with, we love putting out fires in ops, and I used to enjoy the short term, day-to-day working on lots and lots of projects. But this is a bit more long-term in terms of looking at the strategy for the panel and how we progress moving forwards, because obviously the media world and digital media is moving so fast, we have to keep up. So it's different. Getting used to working on longer-term objectives rather than, like I said, putting out fires on a daily basis, but I'm enjoying it. And the company is obviously heading in a different direction, which is interesting and is opening up new opportunities for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things you touched on in terms of the media space that we're entering now, it's funny when you look at this evolution of the industry, as you may say, and it used to be obviously face to face, then we went into CATI, then went into online, and now we're sort of evolving within the technology aspect of the industry. So on that, could you tell us a little bit about how you actually came to work in market research and a bit about your journey?
I mean, my journey started from quite a young age while I was at university. So I was doing two jobs at the time and looking for something sustainable, and lugging milk at Sainsbury's wasn't having the same appeal as it did when I started. And I thought, sitting down, talking on the phone in a nice comfy office with a computer and this is fantastic, better than what I'm used to in the freezing cold. I started, and it's not easy being a telephone interview, as you know, even if you're as smooth as you on the phone. It was a hard gig, and I think anyone who's done telephone or field interviewing will tell you it's a really hard gig.
Helps you build character, doesn't it?
More than character, it's something else, isn't it? And in the first few weeks you take it really personally, and then you realize they don't know you. It is a very, very tough introduction, but I just found it a very comfortable environment. I mean, just so to put it in context, I'd say it's like a melting pot of every person you could ever meet, a caricature almost of people were in that call center. And obviously you worked there with me as well. So, I mean, the stories we have, the characters we knew, it was no 2 days were different, even though the task itself was quite boring. Actually coming to work was a very enjoyable experience, and meeting different people from different cultures, backgrounds, religions, age. We had people who were execs in high profile jobs, opera singers. We had people in pop groups, Graham, and the like. And we all got on really well. And it was almost like a ethnic utopia in a way. You had every race, religion, color, age, and everyone got on, or we found common ground, and it was fantastic. And most of what I've learned in life, I would say, in that period as a telephone interviewer or moving on within the company was at that point, at that juncture, it was really important for me. And yeah, so Jackie Mould, who I think you've cited in your podcast as someone who's important to your career, was vitally important to me. And she gave us all opportunities. And that was the big thing, is that if you did well, you progressed, then you were given opportunities. And there was a direct pathway into operations, not maybe to the researcher side, but there was a direct pathway into the company and to head office, as we would say. So I moved up. I did some recruitment, which was very interesting for a while, and training for new recruits, and then team leading as well, which again, we were looking after, you and me, we both did evenings. And so that was a different dynamic completely. It was almost like being a social worker and a teacher at times, because there was a lot of young people and a big mix, but it was, like you said, character building. And yeah, we really enjoyed it. And then I got an opportunity to be an assistant centre manager at the NOP Wimbledon office where we were at, which was a really good opportunity again. So every time, I mean, once I'd graduated, which was in this period, I never actually looked for another job, because every time I thought about going elsewhere or applying, I would get some sort of promotion or some sort of different task to do. So if it was, just phone interviewing, I think I would have left after a very short period of time. But because it was varied and we were given opportunities, it really helped. And another person who I'll talk a bit more about later, Claire Blythe, was very important in my career. And she was very, very pro meritocracy. She was based on people being given opportunities and at head office as well, which to us was, a different world. So she gave me an opportunity while I was working at Wimbledon to come up and do a few days at head office in Ludgate House, which was really, really interesting. And at the same time, Jenny Lyons, another person who had a big impact on my career, she gave me an opportunity to go and actually be a centre manager in one of our other telephone centres. So we had around 5 at that time, which was based in Harrow. And if I thought Wimbledon was ethnically diverse, this was the most diverse place on earth, where you had every race, religion, colour. And it was very similar, but I enjoyed it. I was there for about 6 or 7 months and had a magnificent time there, really enjoyed it, and obviously learnt, because I was in charge of the whole place. So that's again a different dynamic. Really enjoyed that. And then sort of Claire offered me an opportunity to come and work in the bidding team, which was called commercial services at that point. And that was how big the company was in terms of operations at that point, is that we had a team specifically that used to just quote the amount of projects that used to come in, or sort of specifications or opportunities. And so we had a team that did that. So I had a quite a big team, 6 or 7 people, and you came up and joined after a while. And we used to cost projects. We started off with, like you said, with Catty, and then we moved across and integrated both Catty and Field together as well, and we became an operations department. Like I said, Claire was very, very fervent in her ambition to make ops appear more professional and on a par with the research team. So she ensured, in terms of job titles, we had similar job titles, that we weren't seen as the poor cousins or anything like that, which was really important. And we were given opportunities to progress, and we set up a project management vocation that wasn't there before. So it used to be basically researchers dealing with the telephone centres or the field interviewers or field managers directly, and there was no sort of interlink, or there was no sort of a manager of the project as such on the operations side. So she introduced that, which enabled more people to come up to head office. And so, I mean, that's a massive thing that I think you know as well, that lots of people were given opportunities from the call centres, and not just where our call centre, other call centres, from field, from coding, from all sorts of different operational areas. We were given opportunities to grow and progress and become like a very professional part of the organisation, which was fantastic for us. Everyone went into different fields. So we had people who went into scripting, people who were more, technical, went into that side of things, like Kevin and Charles. Then we had other people who had better man management skills or commercial skills. So everybody was aligned to something. And we also had an international center down the road. So we had lots of international people who'd come and work, people from South America, from Europe. So it was a very cosmopolitan team in head office. And I like to say we brought a bit color to the place, because that team was kind of like the hub. It was vibrant. It was always buzzing. And yeah, so that was that journey. And eventually I just worked my way up to associate director level within that department, and then took on more project management responsibilities and fieldwork management. So because we had such a huge offering in terms of telephone centers, we had over, I think, 1,500, 2,000 field interviewers. And then we had a thriving online element as well, which I think at that point you kind of left when all of that merged under one team. So online came in, then panels came in. And so I made it to sort of director level of project management and fieldwork management in around 2014, 15, and sort of been at that level for that period of time. Never ventured outside ops, never really had an ambition to. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed the experience and managing teams and different people from different backgrounds. So yeah, I love it.
That's really interesting. Thank you. That's really, really insightful. And one of the key things that I picked up there, the majority of your career has been within operations, and you've pointed out the amount of opportunities that have come your way throughout your career. I'd like to know a bit more about some of the obstacles that you faced, if you have, and how you overcame them, and whether they were within operations or whether they were outside of operations.
I can talk a little bit about my background here, which might be a bit more relevant, and I think it's very similar to your background. So I think ethnicity kind of does play a part in your overall sort of awareness of the world, and you can't hide from the fact that it impacts on your life. I wouldn't say it had any impact necessarily in my career and at GfK, which is why I've been there for so long, because I felt like I was given opportunities and it was never a factor. But yeah, I mean, I'm from a similar background to yourself. Sort of third, well, we were second generation, we're sort of third or fourth generation now, aren't we, in sort of ethnic minorities in the country. I was born here in Wimbledon. My parents came over in the 60s. My uncles were professional cricketers, so I think my granddad decided to uproot his family and bring them over here for that purpose. So all the younger siblings, like my mum, had to come as well. So she got into school from the age of 12. So she's been here most of her life as well, all of her life. Unfortunately, sort of, we were a single parent family, which is very similar, I know, to your background. We even grew up in the same estate, although we didn't know each other. Probably got chased by the same people, I would guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know, in the 80s, growing up in a council estate in South London was not easy. You know, I've never really spoken about it to too many people before, but I would say it's a pretty traumatic ordeal. Seen many things, and encountered many difficult situations, and I'm sure you have as well. Some situations where you never thought, actually, am I actually going to make it out of this scenario?
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's character building, but also I realized it was also to do with the scenario that we were in, and not necessarily people themselves. Maybe a lack of education, people, you know, fearing what they don't know. I think that's quite common. And because there were few ethnic families in those areas in those times, we were kind of the brunt of it. And a lot of it was intimidation. A lot of it was it was an era of the National Front and skinheads. So I think we had to put up with a lot from an early age, but we kind of got conditioned to it. And I sort of speak to my kids now and I say, you know, as a child, you're a blank canvas. You know, every experience leaves an imprint on your life. And so those early experiences do influence your behavior and how you become a person. And I would say, you know, living in sort of fear and being burgled and robbed and, you know, having lots of people after you for no reason, it was really character building. But I think I learned the art of negotiation, and I'm sure you did, just to save your own skin a few times. Diplomacy, I would call it, and reasoning. I think these are all things from a very young age that we'd had to encounter, and we're talking like 9, 10, 11, having daily experiences that most children will not have. And so yeah, it was tough, I would say, and it was very eye-opening for most of us, because at a young age all you want to do is fit in, right? you don't want people to see you as different, and you're automatically seen as different from the outset, and you don't know why. And then you realize it's just the color of your skin. That's all it is. It's nothing else. There's nothing else to it, because essentially we are all the same. And it's ironic that one of my first jobs, because one of the things that's sort of important in this scenario is that, and I know it happened to you as well, is that despite the fact that we were in these surroundings, we were expected to get an education. So the family pressure was there to not only sort of have some social and upward mobility, but you are the support network for your family, and you are the provider basically, and you were the eldest child. I was the eldest child, so we had that responsibility as well. So we knew that we had to kind of make something of our lives, even though everything around us wasn't ideal. And I always think back to those days that pressure was good, but it's a lot to take on for a young person as well. And I remember that one of my first jobs was basically working for your club, actually, Arsenal, selling scratch cards to people, but in my estate. So I'd go to 400 odd houses with scratch cards and sort of cash in my pocket to an area which is notorious, and basically door to door knock and try and sell them stuff. And obviously if they didn't win the scratch card, it was your fault. And from that time I learned, and I met so many lovely people and engaged with people in a more, sort of mature way. I realized that it was circumstance, and it was an education. And once they had seen me, they understood me and who I was, the reaction was different. And I think as time went on, and obviously it's different now, more and more sort of immigrant populations entered that sort of area, or council estate housing and stuff. So it's a different dynamic then. But for us, it was a difficult dynamic. And I know my mum made sure that I didn't, for instance, go to schools in that area. She made me go to schools in Wimbledon and Rains Park and outskirts of Surrey, so that I got a different experience in life. And so, coming back home from school every day was a bit of a shock when the buses used to get stoned as they came around the corner. But anyway, the 200, I'm not sure you remember that as well.
It's funny that we can laugh about these experiences now, but like you said, it's growing up, the childhood experiences, the things that we saw and faced. I think it's definitely lessons in life that have really shaped us and helped us in our career and within the industry as well.
Because you're right, there was no situation that you encountered as an adult that would have been more fearful, or, am I going to get out of this scenario, more difficult than what you faced as some of the situations we had as children, stuck in lifts. I mean, I lived on the 7th floor of a block of flats, so there was no escape, and my mum never used to let me out, just because fear of what would happen. And so, it was hard, but I think I had a certain steel, I think, character-wise. Like I said, art of negotiation, diplomacy, but also I felt that I could lead. And I don't know, I've just looked through, I've had a little think about and stuff I did as a kid. So at school, I was kind of house captain, and then I would captain all the football and cricket teams all the way from a young age. So I think I had that sort of capability to lead and sort of guide people and almost take on the mantle for people. And I think you all agree that one of the things that maybe if you're not from a BAME background, it's harder for people to understand, is that every time you interact with someone, you feel as if you're representing your community, right? You feel as if you are sort of the touch point for these people to many of the other people they will never meet. So you have to give a good impression, or you have to almost be the representative of that whole community. And I'm Muslim as well. And, since 9/11, I felt like I'm the representation of Muslims all the time, even though it's not something that's overt, and it's not something that, people are pinning on me, but you have that pressure, you feel it. So I always had that as a child as well. So wherever I went, I think I always felt like I was representing my community, and I still do. And that's why I always want to do something that's helpful or beneficial.
You've said a lot there, and some of the key takeaways, obviously, in terms of what you've previous answers as well, have revolved around inclusion and that feeling of being different, and then representing your community. It's people from a non-ethnic background that just don't understand or may not have had exposure to ethnic people. In your roles at work, how did you find that, being somebody different and interacting with people from a non-ethnic non-ethnic background, and
So,
potentially
yeah.
their views of non-ethnic people when interacting with you?
So I think when I first started out, obviously we all went to head office. For us, it was a big experience. And we have to note here as well that we were young. So a lot of the things we experienced were motivated from a standpoint of not being mature. And so we were learning on the job in terms of maturity and professionalism as well. It wasn't just being a background person. We also had to deal with adapting to a new environment, sort of how to walk, talk, dress. I think you mentioned in your podcast about lowering your voice, all of those kind of things. Yeah, I remember having experiences at college, which was the first time I came across perception, I would say, not racism as such, but somebody's perception of group of people. And I had a tutor, and she kind of said, you've got a lot of potential, you can do really well, but don't hang around with those group of people. And she'd point basically to a group of friends that I had that were of ethnic origin, and said, hang around more with and this was in a Surrey college, so it was hang around with these kids over there. And I even remember when first coming to Ludgate, having that subliminal thing where we wouldn't congregate in large groups or make too much noise, just because we felt maybe it would give the wrong impression, and it had stuck with me. And the irony was with the college tutor was the kids that were in our group were all studying medicine, and a couple of them had been to private school, while the other group were doing sort of BTECs and stuff like that, which, there's nothing against that, but she had misjudged the scenario completely, and she had a perception of loudness and brashness and whatever she had experienced in her life, and was conveying it into two groups of people she didn't know. And I knew both because I was friends across groups, and I used to do that a lot. And so I knew the reality, and it was quite ironic. But I think some of those things stick with you. So it was almost like when we got to a place of work and our call center, it wasn't like that. It was a lot more sort of relaxed, but you're learning to be professional. And, we would go from having doner kebab pizzas to having lunch at the Oxo Tower and with clients and stuff like that. It was a big shock. It was like a bit like going from Philly to Bel Air, from Will to turning up to Uncle Phil's house. It was a bit like that, wasn't it? There was decorum that you didn't necessarily know. And I'd say those obstacles were more to do with maturing as a person, but you were also aware of this sort of the dynamic. And I'd say, to me, class was always an issue. I would say I was more embarrassed about where I lived than necessarily what ethnic background I came from. If you've got both, then it's even a double whammy, isn't it?
Yes.
And so, I always felt that, and I always felt, and it wasn't overt. And I just felt, I talked about Claire a lot there, and a lot of her mission statement was to try and get equality. And you did feel that the researcher role, or the people that were there, were from a different demographic and a different educational sphere to the rest of us. And so you did feel that it was apparent, and nobody ever said it. You were never made to feel inferior. I'd never say that. I'd worked with some fantastic people throughout the years, and always very, very amicable. But I think you just felt that yourself. And I think you mentioned, we've spoken before about sort of imposter syndrome, and you kind of have that for a long time, because almost like, not that you don't belong, but am I really meant to be here, sort of thing, because I haven't studied, I haven't got an MRS certificate, or I haven't done the diploma, or certain things I don't have any knowledge necessarily of data analytics or statistics or weighting or presentations, but I'm in operations. But we were made to feel that this was a valuable skill. And as time went on, you acquired those skills and you became more confident. But I think, self-belief was one thing that is a massive obstacle to overcome. And there's various reasons why you have that. And also managing people. So when you're not used to managing groups of people, it is difficult. And so coming from that background where I had, was very easy transition for me, because I had sort of managed groups then from a very young age, being given responsibility. So I found that easier, although it was helped by the fact that our team in operations in head office was very, very diverse. I think it was the most diverse I've seen outside of like a call center environment. And so that helped. So I had people like I said, we had people of African origin, Asian, South American, European. When the World Cups used to come around, I remember we used to have quite a lot of banter with the sweepstakes because everyone would just pick their own nationality. It was like that. It was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, that helped the transition. But I always found that the people I worked with, whatever background they were from, were very easy to get on. And like I keep repeating, that's why I stayed and have always been at that same place, because I enjoyed it. And that's not necessarily the experience of other people in other departments, in other roles, but it was our experience because operations was fully diverse, I would say.
I've heard this a few times, speaking to numerous people about the differences between a diverse atmosphere within operations and how there's a lot more work to be done on the researcher side. What are your thoughts around that?
A lot of thoughts about that. I mean, I was initially part of a big sort of grad push when I was sort of senior at GfK. And so for operations, I was responsible for vetting lots and lots of grad CVs. And so I've got a really good understanding of the types of people that sort of apply and the types of people that are there. And so, yeah, I could see that obviously social sciences was a subject that was widely sort of studied by most of the people who were applying. Most were from the kind of, not Russell Group, but really good universities, and most had achieved really high grades. And so I would hardly see an ethnic minority person come through, and I've seen thousands of CVs. So there was obviously an issue with attraction, i.e. people feeling sort of that was an industry they wanted to go into. And most of the CVs we would read, we'd see that these people had experience or exposure to research. So they may have done something in a project or part of their dissertation where they'd had to use research methods. So that had sort of provoked an interest within them. And so you could see that that's their avenue. But there was a certain profile of person that was coming through, and obviously that was employed. And I would say on the researcher side, over the years, although I've had lots and lots of people that I've seen, again, maybe it's unique to GfK, but luckily there were role models there, or people that had obviously been on the researcher side that were of an ethnic background. So I think Babita Earl, who's part of the MRS board now, she was one person I looked up to, Babur Ahmed and Ranj Dale as well. These were all people that worked. They even came to telephone centers to brief, which was our first encounter. And it was like, hey, there's people at GfK, the researcher side, who are, client facing, that actually are of the same sort of background as yourself. But I think educationally, they probably had a different background to all of us. They've had their own experiences, obviously, and it may not have been easy, but there were people there of those backgrounds that you could relate to. But you did find that generally in the researcher side, it was more sort of a middle to upper class background you felt. I think it's changed over the years, but I mean the grad scheme itself and lots of agencies did the same thing. You could see that the profile of person that was being looked at was, university standard with good grades, and we never used to see that many sort of ethnic names or interest, to be honest.
What would be your advice to, because it sounds like GfK have been doing obviously incredibly well, and I can even attest to that throughout my time as well in terms of how diverse it was. And yes, you touched on even the researcher side, seeing people from an ethnic background as researchers, even if they did have a different education to us. But what advice do you think you could give the industry in terms of how to replicate what GfK are doing?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say to replicate, because obviously GfK ourselves, we've recognized there's an issue, and there's lots of initiatives currently in place within GfK to try and address this sort of need for inclusion. So I know that Fast Forward Network, which the core team have come and presented to recently, is something that has looked at the gender pay gap as well, and all sorts of, here we're talking about ethnic diversity because it's relevant to us, but all types of diversity, equality and inclusion across the board. And I think GfK have set up a global inclusion and diversity council as well. So they're obviously aware that there's an issue. I think the industry wide has noticed or been made
Mhm.
aware. I think the MRS have done a great job with their reports and apprenticeship scheme to try and bring this to the fore. Yeah, I think there's an issue. There's lots of issues, but engagement is definitely one. And I think there's lots of touch points that we have, and I'm sure most other agencies have those touch points. Whether it be what I call the factory floor, which is essentially the call center environment or field environment, where you have these young, impressionable people that are working for you, and there's large ethnic minority background people there. We had swathes of them, and even now, I've got a cousin who's worked in a call center and said it's very similar now. The students are, vast majority are still of an ethnic background. So there's touch points there, but this isn't a robust sample size as one person, but we had a conversation, and he was saying that basically he never was introduced at the place he worked to what was being done with the research. There was never a pathway for people to go on and exploit what was being done. They were just seeing the telephone element, which was quite boring for them, and they were not given the relevant sort of tools to take it forward. And I think that engagement is really important, because for us, I mean, that must have been 10, 15 of us that came that route through operations, and whether it's ops or researcher, it's just to gauge that interest. And I don't think as an industry we're great at sort of PRing ourselves and doing sort of hype around the work we do. And even if you look at sort of the social media accounts for the major agencies, they're not huge amounts of following that you can see elsewhere. And I think there's room for that to be done, especially in the modern age where youngsters are impressionable, and we do so much with digital research and what's relevant to young people that it should be at the forefront, really. So yeah, touch points. Well, a lot of agencies should use that as an opportunity, because they all have themselves or other suppliers that are doing sort of the field work and data collection, and these people are generally in sort of, not generally, but there's a proportion that are of ethnic minority background, and also more diverse backgrounds. So people who are non-grads, people who are unemployed, for instance. So and there's high levels of unemployment in some ethnic communities in London, for instance, around Tower Hamlets area, those kind of areas. So it's engaging with them, road shows, making sure in those job centres people are aware that this is an opportunity for you to progress. And we've seen the evolution. One thing I'd say at GfK I've seen is in support services or other areas within the business, there's been an increase, like in HR. I've seen more people in IT, in finance. And so it's not just operations or researcher, and also the evolution of roles. So there's data scientist roles now, there's analytics roles now, there's all of these different avenues that people can go down. And it's not necessarily, something that we should ignore. And even if you go to grads, I mean, one of the things that I looked at was that, the sort of the percentage of ethnic minorities going to university now is much higher. I think they said within the Black community, it's gone from 20 to 40% something. It's risen 20% in the last 15 years, which is a huge sort of pool of people that can be,
100%.
Attracted to the business. And I think, one of the things with the attraction is people don't know about the industry, and they don't necessarily correlate real life with what we do. And it's not badly paid as a grad occupation, so that should be highlighted. I think also the different universities. So maybe if you want to attract more ethnic minorities, you probably want to look at universities where they go more or take higher education courses more, and you can attract people in that way. But I mean, speaking to my cousin as well, he was like, research methods at uni was the subject that everybody sort of hated, or they skated around it. And again, not a great sample size, but what he was saying was it wasn't something that was engaging. And we don't have a system whereby we're involved in anything like that. Should we be offering our services as a professional organizations to help people with dissertation, with research projects, using software, they have access to things like SurveyMonkey and SPSS, but can we offer our services to get people involved? Internships. We have a program in GfK with university in Bulgaria called the Erasmus program, and
Yeah.
we get 4 or 5 grads coming over, and they come and
Really?
work with us for 3-4 months every summer. We haven't done it this year, I don't think, but the
I
previous,
remember that. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that. I
and some
remember
of
that.
them have stayed on. So some of them have actually stayed on and worked for GfK. They enjoyed it so much that they stayed on. And so yeah, I'm sure we could do something that within
Mhm.
the UK as well, and within certain areas, internships, work experiences where you think, and for us, we've got kids now, and would it be an industry I'd want my child to get in? Why not? Would there be an avenue for him through me? Yes. Would he know, or would they know outside of me? Probably not. So it's that kind of PR. It's kind of getting
Yeah.
to the people. And I think what my cousin was saying is, if someone had told him, not even at university or college, had told him at school, or given them some sort of fairs, or some sort of workshops at school, that would have probably given more thought to it.
Mhm.
And also, I think we have an issue with our parents as well. So they have a big influence on some ethnic minorities on your career choices, and
Yeah.
that's got to be acknowledged, that our parents have a big influence on what we end up doing, or they try and have one. It's probably less of a say now, but they don't know anything about MR. I mean, my mum still doesn't know what I do. I think
My mum
she
thinks
thinks I
it's
work.
it's the clipboards. You say market research, and they say, okay, so you get a clipboard and you go door to door. No, mum.
I think my mum sees orange, the G and the K. I think she thinks I work for GSK, which probably was her dream of me being in the pharmaceutical industry. I fulfilled it, but yeah, she doesn't have a clue, because they don't understand necessarily. And I think one of the issues we do have generally, and you'll know it from panel recruitment, online surveys, is that actually getting ethnic minorities engaged in research, or actually taking part in research, is also an issue at points. And so we don't always have those people actually within, or we struggle, don't we, to get the
Yeah.
quotas required, because there's not that level of engagement always.
Yeah.
And so it's reaching out to parents, I would say, using the channels they would, I don't know, Bollywood or Nollywood channels, or things, radio stations they listen to, making it something they're
No,
aware of.
that's a very interesting point.
Because I think definitely with the parents, they have an influence. And the first thing is doctor, lawyer, accountant is very traditional into sort of career path for those that have an opportunity. But really, have you thought about what the career path would look like for someone who went into market research? So if you said to someone, look, you can be a research manager or a project manager within 2 years, and within 5 years you can be an associate director, that's the only bit that my mum focuses on, the bit that says director. Don't know what I'm directing, traffic, I don't know, but that's
no,
probably
right.
the
That's
most
really
important.
interesting, Zeeshan. Obviously, one of the things that you touched on is at the heart of what we do at Core, trying to get more young people interested and raise the awareness of the industry. But something that definitely we need to be focusing more is the influence that parents have on, see, individuals' choices and what they want to be when they grow up. And there's definitely a lot more that can be done in terms of trying to overcome this challenge. So I definitely agree with you there, and I think that's a very, very interesting response that you've given there. You actually gave a lot in that, covered a few questions that I wanted to ask, but one of the things that I'm getting from your responses is that you do see the industry changing and it is becoming more ethnically diverse. Is that something that you would agree? And what other examples do you have of that?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, ethnically diverse in essence is what it should be. I think you guys put it well when you said it. Your sort of organization should be reflective of sort of the population itself in certain areas as well. And obviously, it's not always reflective if you don't have an interest or an engagement in that group.
Yes.
But I would definitely say that there needs to be stuff done to keep people, because obviously attracting people, as we've just covered, is hard. And once they're there, you obviously need to keep them. And I see that in the MRS study they recently did on inclusion and diversity. I read somewhere that 51% of people from an ethnic background don't feel as if they belong. compared to over 75% of their white counterparts. So that's there staring you in the face, really. It's saying that people who do come from those backgrounds don't necessarily feel they belong. And that doesn't mean they need more of themselves or people like them to feel like they belong. It's probably we don't cater for difference as much as we should as an industry. And I think that is changing. I think within GfK, for instance, really simple things of engagement. I think, you know, when we moved to Canary Wharf, one of the things they set up was like a prayer room or a contemplation room, which for some people is really, really important, and it's good, and it's for anybody. So you could be of any faith or no faith, but just an area for people to go and sort of get 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And, you know, as I've mentioned to you, coming from a Muslim background, that's important to a lot of colleagues, so, and myself. And so people can go to that area and fulfill their religious duties in that way. Also, I think we went away from sort of a drinking culture, which I always found quite difficult. I did cope with it, and the amount of Diet Coke and lemons I had in Doggett's and the fat controller in Harrow, I can't recall, because as a manager you felt you had to be there and sort of represent, but being your true authentic self is, I think, what we're getting at, is that people should feel like at work they can be themselves, and we will have to adapt, and that's everyone of every background. You can't just go into work and be as you are at home. So I understand that everybody has to make some provisions, but that statement of 50% of people feeling they don't belong seems to suggest to me that maybe we can do more to make people feel included and more inclusivity when we're doing things. So like going away from Friday drinks, for instance, or if it is you feel like the odd one out because everyone else is having something and you're having a Coke, and we changed it to having lunches, and we found that was much more inclusive, where then everybody could come, and you could go somewhere which, again, people have different food choices as well, so you could get somewhere, or, you know, find common ground with everybody. I mean, I know religious days, etc., are unique to certain people, but even that, we're not saying necessarily celebrate them, but acknowledge them, facilitate them. I remember when we were, and Jenny Lyons used to do a lot at Luton in her call center. We used to do a lot during Ramadan, so we would do a sponsored fast in our office to see if anyone would want to join in. And also at iftar time, which is the time of opening fast in the Luton office, they would allow or give the breaks to all the interviewers at that time. And sometimes in the summer it was quite late, which would be last calls time, or, you know, quite late in the day, but they made that provision to make people feel included. And I'm sure that goes on. I'm sure in lots of organizations, because I'm only judging from my perception, but for lots of organizations there are things that go on. But I think to retain staff and to keep people sort of feeling as if this is a place they can obviously grow, then you have to look at what you can do to make the environment around them feel more inclusive. And I've always felt that, but also being in a position where I can dictate or influence that has helped. But I've always found I've had managers that are completely open to everything and never, you know, want to restrict, or, you know, it's never been a question. It's always been inclusive and always try and find out about people and connect with people, no matter what culture, religion. You know, even recently, many colleagues have come from Eastern Europe, from Romania and Bulgaria and the like. And again, it's about how you facilitate them, how you understand them. And we learned lots of things working with those colleagues as well. And, you know, diversity includes everyone. And so we would do things on days that were important to that team, or they would bring in food. We would do it all in turn. So I had a Bulgarian colleague, unfortunately left recently, but she would bring in food on certain days, Bulgarian food, and we would eat and talk, and then we'd do the same. And so that kind of thing. And I'm not sure, you know, a lot of organizations probably do it, but I'm not sure it's probably inclusive enough. And obviously then the next factor is obviously for those people who are in positions, obviously to see direct lines of progress, and whether that's hindered because of their ethnicity, or they feel or perceive it is. Sometimes it may not, sometimes it may be. But I think to take that away, you then have to look at more higher senior leadership, board level, representation, which I think we can all agree isn't really there across the industry.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think there's again, you touched on a lot about inclusion. I think that's one of the key things that it keeps on coming back to, for people to feel engaged and for people to feel that they can have a long, sustainable career within the industry. They need to feel that they're included. I love the fact that you raised the point about prayer rooms. We also have one at Lucid. We also had one when I was working back at Research Now. And that's when I started to feel there are small steps being made. There's a lot to be done, but I think it's important to acknowledge the progress that is actually being made. There's a desire and a willingness to want to change and want to have more people included, which is great. You touched on a few people that were, I guess, instrumental in your career. So Jenny Lyons, Claire Blythe, Jackie Mould. And you mentioned about managers as well. So did you actually have any mentors yourself throughout your journey? And if so, how important did you feel their support was?
So,
were they able to relate in terms of you being from an ethnic background as well?
So I think in terms of mentors directly, I would say no. I did go on a mentoring scheme, and I was a mentee and a mentor, and I did have some wonderful mentors for work related. So I think Nick Moon, who's sort of a semi-celebrity within the research world, was one of my early mentors. And although most of the time we were spent talking about football, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying when he was awake on those occasions, because he used to have a quick snooze while we had our mentoring sessions. But no, they were really beneficial, because for me it was actually connecting with someone. Not necessarily we had the same job role, but we worked together. So he was in social research. I was obviously working with the field and telephone team. So our jobs overlapped. And so getting advice from him and getting lots of information and sort of help from him was really beneficial for me at that stage, as it was with the whole social team, Richard Glendinning and people like that. They were really helpful and supportive. But that was more of a work related. And like I said, just to get to know him as a person was great. And then we connected on a different level. And that sort of, I found it always important to try and be sort of, not friends, I would say, but try and connect with people, no matter who they were, whether they were the cleaner in the office or whether it was the MD. So I always try to connect, get some sort of dialogue going with every person that I interacted. And you learn from every single people. I wouldn't speak specifically about a certain mentor or somebody that I followed, but all my line managers, so my current line manager Lisa Luckhurst, Claire Blythe, Jackie, like you said, they were all people I looked up to. Claire definitely has had the biggest influence on my career. Sort of worked together, or she's been my manager. She was for around 15 years. So you can't sort of say that person hasn't influenced you. And I'd say most of the good habits I've picked up were from there, and from the way she was fair, consistent. And like I said, it was a meritocracy. So if you did well, you were rewarded, and it didn't matter who you were. So those are the things that I really picked up. And at work, I think you learn off of every single person you interact with. So I would pick up things from directors and other people, in meetings and in other situations, and I would admire the way that they interact or the way they deal with certain situations. And you take little bits, and you hope you can do the same to other people, and that they see you as not maybe an inspiration, but someone who can sort of be almost like a role model or someone they can relate to. And I think that was the most important, Phil. I feel that you should be able to talk to people about how you feel, and people should be able to talk to you about what they're going through at work. And I always felt I've had that. Yeah,
that's really good. And I like the fact that you touched on being able to see people in a position of power that you can relate to. And for me, my journey, I've spoken before about the influence that you've had on my career, seeing somebody from an ethnic background, seeing somebody from my area, seeing somebody who spoke exactly the same as me, who was progressing, who was getting these opportunities, who was high up. And I learned a lot from you. I also was involved in the GFK mentorship as well. And as much as I enjoyed that, I think I learned more from you, seeing you in action, our conversations on a one-on-one, more than I learned in the mentorship scheme. Although I found that very valuable as well. And something that we're doing at Core is obviously you're aware of our mentorship scheme, where we're
Yeah.
trying to have mentees aligned to mentors from an ethnic background, just so they can relate and better understand the backgrounds, better understand how our parents may have certain preconceived ideas about certain job titles, etc.
Exactly.
And have people that just you can relate to on a much more deeper level. You've also expressed a desire to be a core mentor in the next round. I just want to ask, what were your reasons for getting in touch to put yourself forward to be a mentor, and what are you hoping to achieve with this experience?
So I think definitely that the level of personal responsibility, which I talked to you about. So there's never been a vehicle for this. And when the core group was set up, and we talk a lot, and I could see how involved you were, and obviously being one of my oldest friends, colleagues, and allies, I knew that if you're involved in it, then it's something that is going to be beneficial, because we've always spoken in the past about progression and giving people opportunities of all backgrounds. We've never really focused on any specific thing, but for something like this to develop, and listening to, so you guys came on and presented at our fast forward a sort of meeting at GFK, and that really did influence me. So I was kind of thinking about it already, and I thought this is a really good thing to get involved in. But I think pandemic kind of does put everybody in out of kilter with what they're doing, and you're kind of like, okay, let me see how this progresses. But once you guys came, presented, and listened to what you had to say, listening to a lot of the stuff coming out of the MRS, I thought, this has been taken really seriously, and it's being pushed forward with an agenda, but quite quickly. Usually things take off, or they kind of subside after a while. There's an initial sort of spurt of activity, and then and I haven't seen that. I've seen more core related stuff in the last few weeks than from the beginning. So it's something that obviously has got a following, and it's got something momentum behind it, and it's going somewhere. So that to me is really important, to be involved in something that's not a futile exercise that's just there as a representation of something for a period of time, but it's there and it's sustainable, and it's something that will be around. And I can see that with the core members that you have, that you're all very, very passionate about it, and you're very dedicated to the cause and to making a difference. So that obviously then attracts people who want to be involved in that. Also, the point I said to you about personal responsibility regarding, I feel like I'm a representation of people or my community constantly, whether that be my ethnic community or whether that be my sort of background socially, that, I want to push people who are not getting an equal opportunity, the opportunity. And so that really drives me to be involved in something that, where I can make a difference and possibly help in any which way I can. And like I said, my services are open all the time, just for whatever is needed. And if I had that level of guidance from a young age, I think it possibly would have helped. It would have helped me definitely, but other people certainly. I think I was lucky in my career trajectory, and also with the people I encountered who helped me. And not everybody is as lucky to have sort of line managers and mentors who help you along the way. So I think it's really important that people can see there is a career in this industry for all, and that the opportunities will be there. And so, yeah, to me, that's key. And so I'm 100% behind everything you guys do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I honestly cannot wait for mentees to sign up to, I'd say, see what I saw, have the be able to reap the benefits from your industry knowledge, industry experience, knowledge, and guidance. So thank you very much for putting yourself forward.
Cool.
What do you think? What bits of advice would you give the person from a non-ethnic background in terms of what they may miss when considering ethnic diversity?
I think the key here is perception, and I think it's to basically approach them with a blank canvas, as I said. And like I'd have conversations, and this is not at work, by the way, but I've had conversations with sort of white friends who'd say, Asian women don't really get into work for longer periods. They have to get married, etc., from a young age, and so it's not really worth employing them, because they're only around for a certain period of time, and then they have to sort of stay at home and look after the family. And those kind of perceptions were, they are incorrect. And I know that sort of Asian women in market research and across all industries is very sort of low in terms of employment. So I know that that's an area where those perceptions have probably influenced people's decisions. And so that kind of thing has to be wiped clear. You have to approach each person that you encounter as if you don't know anything about them. And we're not one homogenous group. So you can't just say, Asians are one way, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, everybody has a unique experience and different things they encounter. Same when we've got sort of Africans or people from Caribbean or parents from those areas. So you have to be very wary of how you encounter people, and the signals you might miss is that you may assume that people feel included, but necessarily not because of anything you've done or anyone else has done, just a personal perception they have. And most disagreements or issues in the world are around perception. About one person sees something one way, someone sees it another way. So if you try and wipe clear of all of those perceptions, then you probably get to see the essence and get to know people. That's the key, really simple stuff. Know their name, find out how you pronounce their name. Some simple stuff. I'm called Z for a reason, because people couldn't say Zeeshan. And I allowed it. And really, like I say to my kids, the things that I compromised on as a child, I won't allow you to do that. Opportunities are your right, equality is your right, and your community or they're like that is a lot of conversations I have. But if we're all in the UK and we're all British, for instance, then the word they or them or your community shouldn't count. A problem within our community is a problem for the whole community. It's not just a problem unique to the Asian community. I hear that a lot, or the Muslim community, and that's not the way it should be perceived. It's everyone. And unconscious bias, obviously everybody has it. We have it, everybody does it, and it's being able to bring that into the forefront of your mind so that you realize you're not doing that. You're not making presumptions about people based on anything, really. You should do it not based on their ethnicity or their social background. And it's about giving opportunities. It's about inclusivity, but opportunities is the key. People don't know they've got an opportunity in research. I align this very similar. I've got a little analogy for you. Is the English cricket board. So I'm a big fan of cricket. I know you hate it, but one of the things
you're going to lose me a lot of friends by saying that.
What, do you pretend you know what's going on?
I know, sixes all round.
Yeah, you did like the odd T20, I have to admit. But yeah, even within cricket, I think when the whole BLM campaign started, there was a massive push from the ECB, which is the English Cricket Board, to invest money in the black community who don't play cricket. And it's so I think it's about £1 million they've invested in it. And it's really ironic because when the first generation of people came from the Caribbean, there was a massive cricket following in this country. You could go to the Oval Test match or any game and the crowd would be 50-50 in terms of ethnic origin. And they were obviously, West Indies were brilliant. They were a magnificent team and they used to have some really good battles with England. But anyway, there was a massive influence on young people in England playing cricket. Now, if you know anything about cricket now, and it's always been, it's kind of an elitist sport, a bit like the way we might see the way our industry is, in terms of you have to go to private school really to play. To select the way the counties are selected, the way they're made up, their boards, their membership, sort of the coaches even. And I think we have that issue with lack of ethnic minority coaches. And so the whole setup is geared towards a few, a narrow group. And you have the same within sort of the industry as well. And we kind of call it like the echo chamber, where you have similar people giving similar views. And so you end up with a very narrow field of people to choose from. Now, it didn't mean, so basically in the last 30 years, there's hardly been, or 20 years, I would say, there's hardly been any cricketers coming from a black background. And they're like, well, why is this happening? And the reason is a lot of the children go to state schools, which is cricket is no longer played in state schools. So they don't have access to it. They don't have an opportunity to play it. Doesn't mean they don't have an interest, doesn't mean they're not good at it. We don't know. They just don't have access. So what the ECB has recognized is they have to fund, you have to invest. And if we do this within our industry, we have to invest. You have to go grassroots. You have to get the kids back into cricket, enjoying it, and seeing it reflected in the makeup of the teams and the players that are playing in the teams. A bit like Asians in football. We have a similar scenario. And I actually coach as well. And I took part in a coaching group a few years ago where we tried to get Asian kids to play football. And we set up a team, a foundation, in fact, that was just for local Asian kids to come and play football. Now, our Saturday sessions were completely full. There were Asian kids there every week. When it came to playing football regularly for a team, then the participation did drop. But that was a choice that the parents had. Whether people take that up or they don't take that up is down to the individual. But having the opportunity to do it is what we're saying. We're not saying give people jobs just for the sake of them being from an ethnic background. But what we're saying is they need to have an opportunity. They need to have an opportunity. They need to have some awareness around it. So a bit like the ECB and the cricket analogy, people need from different backgrounds to be exposed to our industry and given an opportunity. And I think that's what's lacking. And that's why we have the current initiatives in place, because we see that this isn't reflective of normal life and the makeup of the country. And so we need to try and give those people an opportunity. And I think everyone would agree, from whatever background you are, that giving opportunity is not hard. It's not difficult. It's basically more about how we engage. And that's the key bit.
100%. I love that. Absolutely love that. Again, I've touched on that a lot as well, about giving opportunities, but I love how you've expanded on that, the need for us to invest more into the new generation coming through. Now, it's not just doing it for people that are here now, but going deeper, going to the grassroots, and that's how we start to future-proof the industry and ensure that we have a lot more people coming in from a diverse background.
Exactly.
So I guess a couple final questions from my side. Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody with a similar background to you who was starting their career within the industry today?
Now, I would say to anyone, whether they're from an ethnic background or not, is that it doesn't matter how you start or what position you start from. We both started from the basic bottom of the ladder, if you would say, from the data collection part. What's important is that as you're gaining your experience, you look for opportunities to progress and evolve. And that might be in a sector you're comfortable with. So one of the things I really admire about you, Graham, is that you didn't stay with the status quo, is that you tested yourself at every point. At any point where you felt you were comfortable, you then said, no, what can I do more? What can I do differently? You went into different areas. So it's the same for someone who's starting out, whether they're from an ethnic background or not, is to basically persevere. No job's too small, nothing's too menial a task. You have to start somewhere. And even people who come on a grad program, they have to sometimes come into ops and do that role. We used to make people go into the call center and actually work on the phones, and the appreciation the grads had after that for what the interviewers were doing was incredible, because they realized this is a tough gig. And even the parts of data collection that people don't understand. So whether you come in through a scripting or data scientist or stats or HR or IT, it's to make sure you fulfill your potential, but B, look for opportunities. And if you feel that you're not actually being given sort of you're not getting any progression, or you're not being valued for your work, then have those conversations. I think a lot of us are scared of having conversations with people more senior about things that regard our career. And I think career development in itself is something that's a two-way process. You can't progress unless you have the buy-in from your manager, but your manager can't also progress the company if people are at a static level. And I think one of the key things, I'll talk about Claire Blyther's, one of the things that we used to discuss is that actually you want the person whose line manager you are to want your job and eventually replace you. So you should be able to basically give them the skills and tool them with every opportunity so that they can progress and eventually take your role. That should be the idea, not to keep people. And we've all had managers in the past that basically their knowledge or their sort of niche sort of area of experience or expertise, they've kept that as their advantage to maintain their own role. And really what it should be is sharing that knowledge and enhancing other people's experience and knowledge to enable them to eventually, try and take your role or aspire to take some sort of role. So I would say, yes, start wherever you start, work hard, and make sure you are getting the progression you desire, and that you deserve. And I think, again, a perception thing comes in. As some people, their perception of what progression is and how they earned it is different from your line manager, and so you have to come to an agreement, and there has to be opportunities. So sometimes you are static in a certain role in a certain place because there is no opportunity within that field or that realm. So you have to branch out, like I said you did. So you said, I can't go any further here, so I'm going to try and enhance my experience, grow as a person, and try something different, test myself. And so that's the key for me, is that you keep evolving, you don't stay still.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know why I've been looking forward to talking to you for a very long time? Like you said, it took us a while to get this arranged, but we got through the end. And everything that you've said today, it just helps me it encourages me that we are starting core with the rest of the team was the right thing to do. There's been such a massive support for this. There's a huge desire for this to be successful. And every single person that we speak to, everything that they say, all the responses that we hear, it all goes into why we actually built this and why we're going to continue pushing and why we are passionate about this. Because ultimately, we're all different individuals, but we all have the same shared experiences. We've seen the same challenges. We haven't always had the same obstacles, but we've seen how the industry is and we've seen how it's evolving. We've seen that there's a numerous amount of allies within the industry that want the whole industry to prosper, regardless of the background. And I just think it's so interesting and really, really heartening to see this. It's just really, really good. I guess for me, I like the fact that you touched on the need to look for the opportunities and always keep on working, always keep on testing yourself. And if I was able to go back and look at the young me, number one, I'd tell myself not to wear those baggy jeans in the office and get rid of the camera.
Calcanis. That's when crisscross were big.
Wow, yeah. But I still can't believe I wore crazy Avisu jeans, 21 pockets in the office.
I still can't believe you had blue eyes, but anyway.
Well, let's not go there. Moving on. But there's a second piece of advice I would have given myself is about that, looking for the opportunities and don't sit within your comfort zone. Keep pushing yourself. Definitely. If you stay within your comfort zone, there's going to be somebody else who's just as hungry as you, who's got just the same desire as you, the same amount of desire as you, who will want that position more, and they will push more. They will get themselves outside of their comfort zone. And I think it'd be interesting to finish off this podcast by asking you what advice you would give the younger Zeeshan in terms of what you know now and what you wish you'd known before.
That's the difficult one, actually. That is, I mean,
I like this.
I think first of all, yeah, once you're in the Venus flytrap that is market research, there's no escape. Yeah. So basically, I would have said, don't get involved now. I'm only joking. No, once I had made that decision, I mean, there's lots about the industry that I enjoy. So for me, it's a non-invasive industry in the sense that you're not trying to sell something dramatic to people. You're not undercutting people. There's, in a sort of moral sense, I've always found it an industry that I feel comfortable working in the environment, especially the data collection part and all of that. And it's interesting, and you cover all sorts of sectors. I think all I would say to myself previously is probably try and get involved in more of the other aspects. Like I said, I've been in operations for the vast majority, and I never dabbled into the other areas, which I know some people have. So some people went from sort of operations into the researcher side and vice versa. In recent years, we've had people who were in the researcher side come into operations, which is great because it shows how far operations itself has come as a vocation almost. But I think, I would advise myself to venture out a bit more, like yourself, to learn a bit more. Not necessarily company wise. I'm very comfortable where I have been, and I don't see that as something I would change. But maybe more within the industry to try. A lot of times I was pushed into a corner and evolved, and then did something different rather than proactively seeking it. And so, there's one thing being good at your job, but then there's the other is to bring variety and to bring some sort of level of challenge. And I think in recent years it's been good because I've worked with panels now, worked with online, and all the different types of sort of data collection methods there are, and also going forwards now with sort of the tech aspect of GfK. That's something that I should try and branch out with that as well, because that's the future and that's where the company's going. So the advice I'd give to my younger self is be more sort of ready to fail, I guess. And I think that's one of the things I've probably played it safe quite a lot. I've been lucky that I've managed to progress within that. But I think everyone should test themselves, especially when you get to a certain point in your career where I think the conditions are different and it's not you just trying to survive. You can actually make choices.
That's brilliant, Zeeshan, and I think that's a very good way to end this podcast. Honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to join and talk about this subject. It's close to both our hearts. Really appreciate that. And I can't wait to have you on board and mentoring on behalf of Core.
No, it's been great. It's been great just catching up with you in this format, which is good because we don't usually talk like this. So it's a nice sort of different platform to have a conversation about things that we've discussed many times in the past. And just to add that Core is doing a fantastic job. Really impressed with everything that's happened so far, and proud to be some part of it and involved with it. And as I said, it's something that's growing within the industry. So I'm hoping more and more sort of agencies come on board and we get a wider sort of variety of people involved. And I think that's a key as well for everyone to note, that this is not just driven for sort of people of an ethnic background or by or for those people. This is for everyone, anyone who believes in opportunity and equality. It's not to try and single out or group people. It's actually to bring people together and to notice an issue or a gap and then to rectify it. And it was the same with the fast forward in our company with regards to gender pay gap. It wasn't to try and do something different, and people always get sort of upset or offended by things, but it's an issue. It's something that needs to be addressed. The more direct you are, the better conversations you can have. If you beat around the bush, I think you end up at stage 1 and never get to stage 4. So it's good to have an open conversation. Core have started this conversation. Everybody's involved. The MRS, the whole industry is taking part and investing time. I think the key from my point of view is that people realize that it's not a simple fix, and that investment and money is needed to do this kind of thing, and that the things we've spoken about and other people, this is not unique or new stuff. This is stuff people are talking about all the time, is stuff that we can, as people together, we can invest in. And I think that's the key with anything where you're trying to make a change. You have to put some money towards it, or some sort of investment in people. Some of them are simple fixes, others is actually getting to the sort of nitty gritty of why people aren't engaging or coming for roles in your companies or not getting anywhere. So there's a lot to be done.
That's just brilliant. I love that. That is the Obama mic drop moment, isn't it? If I had a gift right now, that would be playing right now.
You just hear it, just play it, just do a drop, just do that.
Hold on, ready? Mic drop.
To find out more about GfK and how they can help you with your research needs, visit gfk.com/home. Our guest today, Zeeshan Siddique, has kindly volunteered to mentor up-and-coming ethnically diverse professionals within the market research industry. For more information on the Colour of Research Each One Teach One mentorship program, visit colourofresearch.org/mentoring. Thank you for listening. Please like, share and subscribe for more ethnically diverse market research success stories.